Hello, my name is Jim. This is my podcast, The Bloody Vegans. You're very welcome to it. Each week, I'll be traveling ever deeper into the world of veganism, discovering along the way a multitude of viewpoints from the political and ethical to the practical. I'll be doing this through a series of conversations, each aiming to further illuminate my understanding and hopefully yours of all things plant-centric. And this week's no different. I'll be chatting with health coach, food blogger and recipe developer Janani Kumar, founder of myveggiehacks.com, about a host of vegan misconceptions and misnomers, as well as charting her journey into the world of plant-based health coaching. Before we get into our chat though, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts. And if you like the show, don't hesitate to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It does really help. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you very much in advance. It really does help spread the word. But for now, I hope you enjoy the conversation between me and Janani Kumar. Tell us a little bit about your kind of journey into health coaching.
Right. So I was raised a vegetarian in my household, and I didn't really even know why I was, given special meals at school, or why my mom once freaked out because I had a hot dog at snack time in kindergarten. And so I didn't really understand, and I was just kind of told to avoid chicken nuggets and to avoid all these things at like pepperoni pizza, like some birthday party. So I kind of just did it. And when I got to college, it was kind of like my first taste of freedom, for lack of a better term. And when the dining hall food really sucked, I toyed with the idea of, just eating meat because it was just more readily available. There were more options. And then that's kind of when I journeyed into the whole conscious eating and conscious cooking kind of mentality, when I really realized that, meat equals an animal that was slaughtered. So that did not align with my ethical views. And then as I progressed through college, I started learning more and more about the dairy industry and the egg industry, and I realized that that wasn't something that I wanted to be supporting either. And so my journey into becoming a health coach really revolved around all these people seeing these dietary choices that I was making, my classmates and my friends and my roommates, and really just asking me, why are you doing what you're doing? And aren't you getting the nutrition you need? Aren't you getting enough protein? Aren't you getting any of this stuff? And so that's kind of, and me explaining to them how I was getting all this stuff made me realize how much I enjoyed talking to people about nutrition and teaching people and breaking myths, breaking misconceptions around the plant-based lifestyle. So that's been my journey to becoming really passionate about being a coach, about being a recipe developer.
That's really cool. And where did your kind of knowledge base come from? Was it kind of learned, through trial and error, research? Was it a more formal kind of route? Where did that kind of learning kind of originate?
So my love for cooking has always been there. So I've always loved to experiment with food and experiment with new ingredients and all that. And my nutritional foundation has been 100% self-taught, reading research journals and through books and through documentaries. So it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about. So it's something that I spend my free time Googling and reading research papers.
And where do your kind of clients come from? Sort of what kind of place are they at in their kind of journey with kind of diet?
Right. So my clients generally tend to come from places where they, for whatever reason, would want to incorporate more plants into their diet. Now, whether that means becoming full-on vegan or simply eating more plants, they either don't know where to start, or they're afraid of the fear of failure, being too hard on themselves, and just wanting to cut all the judgment from people around me, because I can't really tell you how many people have, told me, I really want to try this lifestyle. I really want to eat more plants. I'm concerned about the animals. I'm concerned about my health, and I'm concerned about the environment. But I'm afraid that if I just try to cut everything out one fine day, I will last maybe 3 days, maybe a week, and then I'll just like revert back in and then eat a steak, and all my progress will just go down the drain, and I'm going to be facing so much judgment from all these people, especially on the internet, where there's honestly no middle ground. It's either you're deficient because you're a vegan, or you suck because you're not a vegan.
What are the kind of common misconceptions that you come across? You mentioned there, like, folks online. Everyone's a nutritionist online at the moment. In the kind of comments section of any post. So, what are the kind of common misconceptions that you come across?
Well, unsurprisingly, the first misconception that I've come across is the protein deficiency myth, right? So people always ask me, but you don't eat meat, so that must be pretty hard to get on your diet. And to that, it's become kind of a point of frustration, because I mean, we're not living in the 70s or the 80s where awareness wasn't maybe this much, but we're living now in it's 2020, and the options are just through the roof, and so yes, so it's definitely become a point of frustration for me to explain to people that no, I'm not about to die from protein deficiency. And if I may launch into a little spiel about how protein is actually used by our bodies, it might give a better understanding about why protein is not the nutrient that we need to actually worry so much about in our diets. So there are 9 essential amino acids. So protein is composed of amino acids. And there are way more than 9 amino acids, but only 9 of them cannot be produced by our own bodies. So it is essential that we eat them from our food. So that makes sense, right? So we eat the amino acids in our food. But the common misconception comes from the idea that we need to eat all 9 amino acids in every single meal, every single day. But really, the way our bodies use these amino acids is a lot different. So when I explain this phenomenon to people, I like to use what I call the bucket analogy. So if you have a bucket and you're filling it with water, you can fill up the bucket to the brim, and you can use that water throughout, let's say, the course of, I don't know, maybe a week. And no amount of overfilling that bucket is going to work, because that water is just going to, spill over. So there's no point in trying to overfill a bucket. It's not going to make the bucket any bigger or make your body or make the bucket change. So I like to think of each amino acid having its own bucket in our body, meaning that our bodies store the protein just like that bucket stores that water for any given course of time. And it uses it over that course of time. So any excess amino acids that we consume is just going to exit our body. It's just in and out. So why would we work harder to eat all that amino acid if it's just going to, go unused? So it's not essential that we eat all 9 amino acids in every single meal, or actually even every single day. As long as you get an adequate amount of it throughout the course of a few days, you're good to go. So that's definitely one of the myths that it's not like water-soluble vitamins that we need to get every single day. Like, our bodies store that protein and use it over time.
So yeah, that's one that I've heard quite a lot of, this kind of idea of a complete amino acid profile. Is that the kind of the reference point that you kind of talk about there? That people need this kind of complete amino acid profile, and your your kind of research has found that actually what you need is those aminos over the course of a period of time. It doesn't necessarily equate to they need to be, like you say, in every meal or in every day.
Yeah, people stress out about, amino acid pairings, and they say your body needs X, Y, and Z amino acid to be eaten in the same time as this other amino acid for your body to use it. Actually, our bodies are quite complex and they're smart, so we don't need to be worried about amino acid pairings with each other. That's quite a that's a quite common misconception.
And in your kind of research, have you found that kind of all of those amino acids are still prevalent in kind of plants? There's no shortage of them, or perhaps much lower frequency than in animal products, etc.
Absolutely. So there is this misconception around plant-based foods that plant-based foods do not have protein, like I mentioned. But if you really break it down and you take a piece of meat and you trace it back to its roots, that root is plants. It's not the animal itself. The animal synthesized the amino acids from the plants. So, why not cut out the middleman and just go straight to the source? That's kind of where my mind goes.
Absolutely. I have a question about kind of like quantity of protein, because I think the world is obsessed with protein at the moment. There's, like you read it on, I've read it on chocolate bars, for example, that say that it's got X grams of protein in it. And I kind of, like you said, you get lots of people kind of asking the question, where do you get your protein from? All those kind of things. Do you get a sense that people perhaps don't know how much protein they need, and kind of, how do you work that out? What is the equation that you've kind of come across?
Yeah, so you're right. So people generally assume that more protein is better, and I found that that's not the case. So generally, the RDA, the recommended daily allowance for protein, is for every, let me see if I get this right, for every 1 kilogram of body weight, for an average sedentary person, you need 0.8 grams of protein. So this roughly translates to around late 40s to early 50 grams of protein per day for someone who weighs between 140 and 150 pounds. And sorry, I'm from America, so my mind goes immediately to pounds and not necessarily kilograms.
Pounds works for me, don't worry.
But, I've read studies that have shown that actually the average American is consuming around 2 times this recommended daily allowance. And I'm saying 0.8 for the average, 0.8 grams of protein to a kilogram of weight for a sedentary person. But even for a very, very competitive athlete, that number doesn't go above generally 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And I find this incredibly problematic because there are people who are not, professional bodybuilders, professional athletes, and very, very competitive, people who are not in these very high exertion exercise methods that are consuming, like the average consumption is in America is 2 times the RDA. And so I find that incredibly problematic because people have no idea what they should be consuming. And the media is pumping us full of these ideas that more protein is what our bodies need.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like I say, I've found it so bizarre when I see the grams of protein written on the front in big bold kind of letters on the front of like a Mars bar or something. This thing is just a strange concept that you'd be eating a Mars bar to ensure that you get the right quantity of protein, like as if that's part of your kind of healthy diet. It's really odd, isn't it? Um, so moving away from protein for a second, other misconceptions. So I suppose the big one that I kind of hear a lot of, like I say, everyone's a dietitian or a nutritionist as soon as you mention the word kind of vegan. B12, like let's talk about B12 for a second.
Right. So I'm just going to like preface this by saying that I recently got a blood test done, and I am not B12 deficient. So I'm just going to throw that out there and just put it on the record that I am not B12 deficient. So for vitamin B12, yes, I have heard so many things about vitamin B12 being present only in animal products. But really, it's not created by animals, and it's not created by plants. It's actually created by microbes in the soil. So for someone to claim that because you don't eat meat, you don't get B12 is kind of ridiculous, because it's not created by animals. And in fact, studies have shown that the vitamin B12 that is present in animal flesh is actually less bioavailable to our bodies. So vitamin B12 deficiencies are not vegan specific. They're not vegetarian specific or plant-based specific. Anyone can really have a B12 deficiency.
And so, with it not being, specifically created by animals, etc., would you say that there's a potential for, kind of anybody to have, a B12 deficiency, regardless of their diet? Is it, particularly with it being not an effective source of B12, getting it from animal products, would you say that there's a potential for that? And you mentioned kind of blood work there. Like, is that something that you've kind of, as you've become a health coach, kind of wanted to kind of take control on? Because I'm kind of intrigued as to, perhaps when people have been in the lifestyle for some time, they get very kind of aware of the various deficiencies they could have. I think, talk for myself personally, far more aware of any of these deficiencies even existing than I was prior to kind of going into a vegan lifestyle. And it does make you think, should I at certain points in my journey kind of get checked? What would your kind of recommendation be around kind of things like blood works?
So actually, when I went to go get my blood work done, I was initially going for a vitamin D level check because a deficiency does run in my family. So the women in my family have historically been vitamin D deficient. And so along with that, yes, definitely, I had never thought of B12 until I had really started doing research into a plant-based lifestyle and really started making the shift. So that was a reason I got the B12 check, because I had not been taking a supplement. I had never really been supplementing, honestly, anything, because I didn't really feel the need to. And so that was the reason that I got my B12 levels checked as well. I didn't anticipate to be, deficient, because my plant-based milk, my plant-based cheeses, I eat a lot of nutritional yeast, and those, it's written right on the packets there, a B12 fortified. So it didn't really come as a surprise to me that I was not deficient, but I have become more, to answer your question, yes, I have become like more hyper aware of, things like B12 and iron and protein and all these things that are stereotypically geared towards targeting everything that, quote unquote, is wrong with a vegan diet.
I don't know about you, but I actually found that kind of, in a way, one of the positive byproducts of becoming kind of vegan is that you do probably pay closer attention to your diet and your nutrition than perhaps you did before. I think there's one of the biggest misconceptions about like an omnivorous diet is that it provides everything you need just by the fact that it's omnivorous. But you could well be eating from a fast food chain every single day, and that's omnivorous. And then as soon as I mention the word vegan, you want to, people want to talk to me about protein deficiency. And I don't know about you, but I definitely find that that's the case. Like, it's probably a positive byproduct, like I say.
Definitely, like transitioning to a plant-based lifestyle, forces you to really open your eyes to all the other nutrients out there, including like vitamins and minerals and micronutrition was something that I was not necessarily paying such focused attention to until I, started coaching and started recipe developing and becoming more into nutrition. But what I've found is through my experience, people will tout the what do you call it? The protein benefits of a meat-based lifestyle, and say, "Oh, look at this chicken! It has so much protein." And I'm like, "Okay, from a pure number standpoint, yes, it does have protein, but it's kind of like a completely discounting all of the health risks that come with meat." Even just discounting all of that stuff, looking at a chicken and saying, this is doing one job, just one job, which is protein. And then you turn your focus to a plant-based lifestyle and you say, okay, beans. Beans have protein. They also have complex carbs. They also have fiber. They also have zinc. They also have folate. They also have magnesium. They also have a ton of other micronutrients that I cannot remember right now. And you realize that when you are eating a plant-based lifestyle, a plant-based diet, you are essentially, your food is pulling double, triple, quadruple duty on you. So you're not just eating something for strictly just the protein. You are getting so much more out of your food.
I wanted to talk to you about that actually, because this is something I've kind of heard from people before, who kind of, particularly those who are very health conscious, that their kind of notion of macros, like, so this is another word that I think has kind of like filtrated into the kind of like common psyche. Everyone's kind of concerned about their macros, regardless of how much weight they're lifting or those kind of things. But the kind of, I guess, the notion of a plate before, from what I kind of understand from people I've spoken to in this world, is that they would look at a plate, in their omnivorous kind of world, and they'd think of that's my protein source, and that is 20% of my plate, or whatever the protein target they're trying to go for is, and then they make up the rest of the plate with carbs and fat, but they're all these separate sources. And so I'm interested in that point that you just made there around, actually they're not the same, they're not different sources, they're actually the same source, and it's kind of like you say, pulling kind of double, treble, quadruple duty by doing all of these different tasks. Is that kind of the, if you are kind of interested and you're into the macro side of things, is that the kind of way that you would start to think about a plate?
It definitely complicates the way you would think about a plate, because suddenly you're not just saying this corner is strictly this corner is strictly this, and this corner is strictly this. So it definitely complicates how I look at a plate and how I would build a balanced meal. So yeah, it's definitely something that I'm still trying to figure out on my own here, because suddenly it's not so black and white anymore, right?
Yeah, it certainly isn't. There's like I say, there's lots of people who are kind of interested in that world, and if you like the kind of the sort of pseudo nutrition, I suppose, or at least the common mainstream versions of nutrition, make it quite simple in a way. It's like, eat this big piece of chicken, and then have this smaller bit of pasta, and so on and so forth. It does kind of make it simplified in a way. But like you say, it's one of the benefits, but also one of the complications, I suppose, of a sort of a vegan or a plant-based plate, is that it's going to have things that are doing multiple jobs. So thinking about planning a diet is kind of important, I suppose, in any diet. Which kind of brings me on to my next kind of question. I'd love to talk about where do you kind of start when it comes to planning, a healthy diet? What's the kind of like the cornerstones of the planning, if you like?
So for me, planning a healthy meal revolves around color. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, we are drawn towards beautiful looking things, right? So very colorful looking foods. So bright berries and beautiful vegetables, and and so it interests me to well, I guess interest is the wrong word. It makes me kind of, I guess, laugh when I see, like a piece of steak, and it's just like this one solid dull color, and somehow we have been conditioned to look at that and say yum, but instead we see these, beets and carrots and spinach and Brussels sprouts and things that have all these various different flavors and colors and textures and crunch levels, and kind of shun those things. So for me, the cornerstone of eating healthy is to eat in color.
Yeah, I love that. The kind of eat the rainbow kind of idea is for nothing else, like aesthetically, it looks wonderful on your plate, and you like you say, the textures, the flavors. Like I've definitely found that like my plates have become far more like interesting since transitioning to a vegan lifestyle. There's things that I just probably wouldn't have ever bothered to cook or to attempt to make before, and I have a much more diverse kind of diet than perhaps I did before. And I guess like as a meal planner, is this something you're kind of super conscious of? Is like helping people to kind of understand what it is they should be eating?
Yeah, definitely, and definitely understanding how to prepare these foods, because there are a lot of people who are on kind of a raw vegan diet, and that's a great diet. But there are certain foods that are actually more nutritious when they're slightly cooked. So it is one of my missions is to help people understand how to get the biggest nutritional bang for your buck.
That's kind of a fascinating point as well, because I definitely had in my head that kind of the closest to raw veganism you could possibly be is probably better for you. Maybe that's a misconception within even the vegan community. So how do you kind of like which are the kind of foods that you kind of know need to be cooked? How do you work that out?
So this kind of ties back into the myths about deficiencies. So iron deficiency is definitely one of the things that non-vegans tout as, heme iron, which is found in animal products, is supposedly more, well, not supposedly, it is more readily absorbed by our own bodies than non-heme. So non-heme is found in plant-based foods like leafy greens, kale, spinach, and other leafy green vegetables. And the chief issue is that when these vegetables are raw, they contain oxalic acid. Now, oxalic acid is a nutrient blocker in our bodies. So when we consume like a spinach salad or raw kale salad, obviously it's not going to hurt us, but the oxalic acid is going to prevent the receptors in our body from actually latching on and helping our bodies absorb the iron present. So when we cook down spinach and kale and other oxalic acid containing vegetables, we break down that oxalic acid, which makes not just the iron, the other nutrients as well in the vegetable more readily absorbed by our bodies.
That is fascinating. Definitely something I wasn't kind of aware of, but I definitely heard this kind of misconception, or like you say, there's some element of truth to it around heme iron. That many people have kind of said that to me as, well, you've got iron, sure, in those, kidney beans or whatever, or those, leafy greens, but you haven't but you haven't got the heme iron. So it's kind of fascinating to kind of hear that how it actually kind of translates, and the cooking method actually plays a part in it. So, like, talk us through the kind of journey of like a client with you. You know, how do you go about like assessing their needs and kind of building out a kind of a meal plan and a profile for them?
So, so generally, I will get a sense of where they are in their diet, and I will get a sense of what their goals are, right? So, you know, their reason for wanting to eat more plants, if they want to go full on vegan or just eat more plants, and what are their chief concerns. So kind of clearing their head of any kind of fear or judgment or anything that might be blocking them from actually getting started. Because getting started that's the hard part, right? Going from 0 to 1 is harder than, you know, going from 1 to 10. And so to get a good idea of what's been blocking my clients starting, and then I will go on and assess what are they currently eating and their energy levels. Energy levels are so important for me to really get an idea of what's working for them and what really isn't. And then I generally follow up with them, and I give suggestions such as, you know, maybe incorporate this into your diet, or I get really good energy by incorporating some chia seeds into my bowls, or granola is a great pick me up for when I'm feeling kind of down. So that's kind of how that's generally the journey that my clients and I take.
And would you say that they're predominantly the folks that you kind of speak with are omnivorous, certainly at the start of the journey, perhaps even, you know, eating quite a lot of meat, and their kind of reason to come to you is purely that, or the beginning of that kind of transition? That's what they're there to do.
Yes. So I do cater very heavily to the omnivorous community who for whatever reason, maybe it's their own community who eats a very, very heavily meat-based diet, and it's hard to, you know, sometimes it is hard to go out with friends and go to a restaurant that, you know, maybe the only vegan option is French fries, and you don't want to just be eating French fries all the time. They're delicious, but come on, there's such a thing as junk food vegans, right? So I do cater very heavily to the omnivorous community who has like watch a documentary and they are like now completely disgusted with meat and dairy or whatever, or they are just having a lot of health problems and energy dippings and, you know, just mood swings, and, you know, and a plant-based lifestyle is appealing to them because of all the nutrients and of all the energy and mental benefits. So yeah, to answer your question, the majority of the people that I speak to are, I'm not vegan, but I would really, really like to eat more plants. Can you help?
Yeah, I can imagine that's there's a large percentage of people who would kind of want to do that, particularly like this time of year. You know, we're just coming to the end of Veganuary, or getting towards the end of it. And I think, you know, this is probably the point where people have tried all of the, like you say, the vegan junk food options that are available in Veganuary, like, and they're kind of like, in a way, I kind of like, I go back and forth as to where I stand on them, but I do think that they at least kind of offer a transition, if you like, or a gateway drug, if you like, to plant-based food, and hopefully people will go on a healthier journey from there. But you know, at least it gets people talking about veganism. Do you find that that's particularly this time of year, that kind of that is the way people are kind of going, that they perhaps, you know, maybe have even tried veganism in inverted commas or a plant-based diet for a period of time, and kind of, and then found that they've developed some either health complications, or at least they didn't feel as optimum as they'd wanted to. The kind of almost like fallen into the junk food trap.
Actually, not from my experience. I would say the converse is kind of true. A lot of people use vegan junk food as a reason to justify why meat is healthier. Like, so I'll give you an example. And I found it actually quite comical, but people on a one-track mind will see what only what they want to see and not facts as they are. Anyway, so it's no secret that vegan junk food exists and it's prevalent, and it's I love vegan junk food. It's an incredible treat that I enjoy every now and then. But I'm not going to be going and eating a Beyond Burger or an Impossible Burger every single day of my life. They're delicious and they're a treat, but that's what they are. And no one is calling them a health food. But the other day, I had a coworker tell me how the Impossible Burger is so much worse for you than a beef burger because it has a longer ingredients list than 100% vegetarian fed beef. And I found so many issues with that statement because sure, no one is denying that plant-based meat in general is highly processed, and highly processed food should be, limited in a balanced diet, right? Not eliminated, but limited, right? So balance is really key. But I found it really problematic that he said that, the only ingredient in this burger is 100% vegetarian fed beef. And I'm like, okay, that's the only ingredient they're listing. They're not listing the hormones. They're not listing all the other really nasty, nasty stuff that comes in flesh. I mean, it's really, when you come down to it, like, what is meat? It's literally flesh. Like, and so to just say that this is only one ingredient, in my mind, is so wrong. I mean, where do you stand on this?
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, I had a similar discussion with somebody the other day, and what they were kind of talking about was the kind of, it's a fairly standard thing that you kind of hear when you sort of been vegan for a while, but is they're talking about air miles and soya products and deforestation, and so on and so forth. And rightly so. Obviously, I don't in any way agree with anything that causes deforestation. However, my question was, what did the cow eat? To which they didn't necessarily know the answer. And to be frank, nor do I. But I do know that broadly speaking, depending on where your source is, but between sort of 70 and 90% of the soya that's grown, on the earth, if you like, whether it be Amazon rainforest or any other area of the world, is consumed by animals. So I was kind of saying, yeah, well, I get where you're coming from, but that soya product, has gone into that animal rather than just going straight into meat. And then we were talking about, sort of saying about, things like antibiotics, where's this, we've all heard the kind of fear of superbugs and antibiotics resistance and so on and so forth. And for a long time, I'd kind of wondered about that. Thought, well, I haven't taken any more antibiotics than I used to. I've probably had antibiotics about 3 times in my life. I'd say I've been quite fortunate. So where is it? Where's it coming from? Where's this? I don't necessarily see doctors prescribing antibiotics left and right, and it's kind of it's fed into the meat. And to your point, I completely agree with you. I think there's so much that is either unregulated, or if you do read the regulations, you're kind of shocked by what is allowed. Even think about like milk. And I remember reading reading something that said what the acceptable level of pus that can be in that can be in milk was, and I thought, I don't really want to eat anything that's got an acceptable level of pus. To be quite honest, so yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that's quite a common one. That kind of that argument around my beef's got one ingredient, and I think you're absolutely right. One that we'll have to kind of combat, because the ingredients list on a lot of these, like you say, the Impossible Burgers and so on, it is long, and that kind of leads me to a point around, like, do you kind of find that, and you might have gone through this on your own journey, but the kind of educating yourself to be able to kind of combat friends, family, etc. And then when I say combat, I don't necessarily mean you want to get into arguments, but you want to be informed, right? Like, do you find that that's kind of an important part of your role as a health coach, is helping people really understand what it is, one way or the other, what it is that they're doing?
Yeah. So in my journey, thank you for asking this question, because it really leads me into the whole mindset and really standing for what you believe in and continuing to believe in it kind of idea. So before you defend yourself to anyone else or defend your own ideas to anyone else, I found that it was so important for me to do my own research and find a reason to defend my choices to myself. And in a big way, we are our own biggest critics, right? So we tend to be pretty harsh on ourselves. So for me to be like, okay, I need you to sit down, and I need you to read these articles and read these journals and accept these numbers for what they are, and then really formulate your own ideas and your own ideas of what is balance, what is right. And so to your point, yeah, because I did that research and I believe really, really strongly in the benefits to my own health, to animals, to the environment of a plant-based lifestyle, I found it so much easier to be confident and stand my ground when I feel like someone is either challenging me or educate them if they are simply curious.
And do you find you get kind of more or less resistance in the position you're in from perhaps people, not necessarily your clients, obviously, but from kind of people that sort of surround you in your orbit, that they kind of feel like, well, I want to challenge Janani based on, I know what she does, so almost like she'll, I guess it's in a part, it's like curiosity actually, but it's sometimes framed as challenge. Do you find you get a lot of challenge from kind of people in your circle?
It depends on which circle. So I do not get this kind of within the Indian community in I'm from the Bay Area. I'm in San Francisco. So from the Indian community here, I don't get this kind of challenging, because such a large portion of Indians are vegetarian and more heavily plant-based. So there really aren't that many questions regarding protein, regarding deficiencies, or regarding, variety of food or taste or so nothing really there. But within my Caucasian community, it's usually where I run into a lot of these questions, and especially it's weird, because I find that a lot of people are either so interested or so ready to attack.
Yeah.
So they're either so into it that they're already vegan, right? Or they're just so ready to attack.
I definitely think that's a symptom of today's society, whether it's whether it's kind of induced by social media or the political situation, or which ones come first, I'm not sure. But there's definitely a sense, isn't there, of polarization, if you like, that people want to go one way or the other, and there's no middle ground. There's no room for discussion. It's kind of like, I'm like you say, I'm either with you 100%, or I'm going to attack kind of everything that you stand for. I almost think it's like I said, I kind of wonder whether there's almost a bit of curiosity within that. Like maybe this is a little bit overuse of positive intent, if you like. But when I find that people kind of have that little element of attack, I kind of almost think, well, what they're kind of really doing is asking me to kind of test the theory, if you like. They're sort of saying, is this thing that you're talking about, can you bust all of my myths and legends? They might be doing it in a slightly aggressive way, but can you kind of like validate for me whether this is something I should pay attention to? Because by you existing, if you like, as a vegan, your very existence is saying that what I'm doing is wrong, what I was taught was wrong, my upbringing was wrong, and so I'm going to challenge you on it because you're challenging just by your existence my very sort of fabric. I don't know. Do you get any sense of that? Is that just me?
I mean, I guess now that you bring it up, it's not something that I necessarily thought about, but now that I'm thinking back on it, I don't simply exist to shove veganism, plant-based diet down people's throats, right? So I'll just be sitting here, minding my own business. And if someone sitting next to me is having something else, whatever, like I don't care. But, it just, when the same people make it a point to constantly bring it up and not, and like you said, not in the nice way, kind of like in the aggressive way. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, it's kind of like, why are you just bringing this up like randomly? Like, don't you have anything better to do than to like, like what are you doing? And they'll bring it up in like the weirdest ways. Like I'll be sitting next to them and eating, minding my own business. And they will be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'll just be like, "What?" They're like, "I'm eating like chicken and I'm sitting like right next to you. I'm so sorry." And I'll just be like, "Why do I care?"
It's absolutely, there's definitely that. And then it's sort of almost, I think that sort of example, like it's almost an invitation they want you to make some sort of statement about that chicken, like so that they can get into a bit of a debate. Like I say, I'm trying to view it as they want a discussion, and I find the calmer and the kind of more considered my answers are, then probably it de-escalates it quick and we get into a better discussion place. But it certainly wasn't like that at the beginning. I was like, I was definitely far more like ready to like fight back, if you like. But yeah, you do feel like you have to be like super equipped to kind of go into any social setting. Like if you're going to, ask for a vegan menu in a restaurant and you're with a group of friends who are omnivorous, I'm kind of fully prepared as soon as I ask for it. But that's going to invite everyone to gather round and ask all of their questions.
Yeah, and that was actually the premise of the vegetarian carnivore. Like the reason I named my blog The Vegetarian Carnivore was to really challenge the notion that vegetarians, that vegans can't eat meat. But, the idea that I wanted to get across to people was that whatever you eat, I can eat without the meat. And that's a concept that like breaks people's brains.
Yeah, like expand upon that concept a little bit more, because just in case anybody's listening's brain is broken.
So, if just very basically breaking it down, meat is simple. Meat is texture and meat is flavor, right? So when people look at me and they say, "Oh my gosh, what do you eat? Like raw tofu?" And I'm just like, "Well, what do you eat? A raw chicken breast? Like without cooking it, without seasoning it? Like what do you think I do?" It's like, so really, meat has to be cooked and it has to be flavored. And honestly, if you don't cook meat and you eat it, you might die. So there's one big perk of, not eating meat, is that if I accidentally eat something raw, I might not die.
I love that concept, that like when you break it down, that ultimately it's, like you say, texture, fat, oil, salt, pepper, whatever's been put on that thing. It's those constituent parts and textures and flavors that make it the kind of enjoyable experience. I think about that with like the plant-based burgers and so on. Like, what is it that I enjoy about, what did I enjoy about kind of an omnivorous burger? It's like, well, I liked the bun and I like the gherkin and I like the kind of meaty texture and the oil, the sort of the oiliness, if you like, to some extent. Although I don't particularly like it that greasy, but the kind of relish, the ketchup, the mustard, like this. Most of that is completely replicable. There's only and even the textures and the like you say, you could get into the junk food debate, but you could even have the majority of those textures and flavors and still have a relative degree of health. Actually, if you went kind of like bean burger type route, I love that concept, that kind of the vegetarian carnivore kind of concept. I think that's like you say, it pops people's minds. But it's probably like a very positive kind of concept for people to get their heads around if they are thinking about, the amount of things I'll miss if I go vegan or plant based.
Yeah, and it was also kind of back to your point about being hyper alert all the time, like, with your shield up, like ready to defend your choices as someone who doesn't eat meat. The name, the vegetarian carnivore, also came out of kind of that defensive side where, I was just like done being attacked and just ready to attack myself.
Love it. Love that. I'd love to talk to you just sort of briefly about like the San Francisco kind of area. My kind of conception, if you like, from across the pond over here is that San Francisco would be a pretty kind of liberal oasis, if you like, in the States, where perhaps there is a huge vegan population, vegan options on every corner, etc. Is that your experience, or does it not quite pan out like that?
It totally pans out like that. And I am so happy to be in this area. There are like 5-6 full vegan restaurants that I can think of off the top of my head right now. And there are so many in San Francisco City itself. And then there are a bunch in Oakland and in the South Bay. And they're literally everywhere. And even if you go to a place without... what I love about San Francisco is that you can go to a place that's not vegan, and the word vegan, vegetarian, plant-based, they're so mainstream. So if you go to a place that's serving, everything, and you ask for something that's vegan or vegetarian, the servers know what you're talking about. It's not, oh, so does that mean you can eat cheese? Is chicken okay? Is eggs okay? Like, that's not a question that you get. And I just love how mainstream this term is in this part of the world.
Well, that's awesome. I'm very very excited. That's the kind of experience like around the San Francisco area. I hope that kind of spreads, because that's definitely not. I think in sort of central London, that's definitely that's definitely the experience, depending on where you are, but. Largely it's exactly the same experience, but you travel outside of central London and there are still lots of pockets within the UK where you absolutely, you're explaining that Parmesan isn't isn't vegan, and in fact that many cheeses aren't even vegetarian. Like that sort of you find yourself in that kind of conversation, and there's so many times I've had to make a sort of sides tapas, if you like. So, the kind of like, well, I'll have the fries, and if I get the mushrooms and like the spinach, and like you're sort of like trying to cobble together like sort of 5 or 6 things, and like meanwhile telling the rest of the party you've got these like amazing like mains and stuff. Sort of, don't worry, I'm fine. It's okay. I'll eat the these nachos or something. Like there's that kind of thing. Like definitely that's the experience I've had outside of those central areas.
That's really interesting that you say that, because so on social media I follow loads and loads of vegan eateries and vegan pop-ups and vegan grocery stores and stuff, and I have found that so many of them are in the UK. Like honestly, even vegan releases by ice cream companies and international food chains. I'll click on a link and it will say opening in our UK location, and I'm like, oh my god, why are all the fun releases happening in the UK and not here?
Yeah, we are quite lucky. Like particularly like I say, London is an amazing hub for it. Brighton as well is awesome. Bristol is another UK city that's kind of renowned for its vegan offering. But I think one of the benefits in the UK of that is because the country is kind of so small, if you like, in comparison to the States. Like ideas and kind of popular kind of concepts, it spread very, very quickly. So when we talk about distance, whenever I'm talking about distance with like any of my friends who are Australian or American, and I'll say something's an hour away, and I'll say that as if it's quite far. They'll be like, well, an hour is like that's round the, like, especially my Australian friends, like that's popping around the corner. Just going to the shops is like an hour, whereas for you could live in Cardiff and you're 2 hours away from London. Like that's the general experience. So I think ideas do spread, and yet we've got I suppose there's quite an affluent and densely populated area too. So I guess it does make sense to launch things in places in the UK. And I don't think meat's quite as intrinsic in the culture. I mean, it is very, very kind of deeply rooted, but as the States, my sense of the States is that, the concept of, eating meat is almost like part of the identity of the nation in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Hamburgers and hot dogs and chicken wings are, like the fried chicken is like our national identity.
Yeah, I mean, there's not many other places in the world where people will sort of list off all those things that you just said, like when they identify a country, like they'll list off a whole bunch of different meats, and arguably the kind of concept of fast food as it currently stands is a kind of American invention. So I think it's probably a harder sell in certain places in the States, veganism than in the UK. Maybe that's at least my perception. Yeah,
totally possible.
So my kind of I guess final questions are like, where would we go about finding like your blog, Instagram online presence, or even kind of benefiting from some of your health coaching?
Yeah, so my blog is www.myveggiehacks.com, and there you can find the recipes to my foods, and you can find me on social media on Instagram at The Vegetarian Carnivore, and on Facebook at The Vegetarian Carnivore. And if you want to connect with me further and pursue my course or my personal coaching, I will be launching my transitioning to a vegan lifestyle course in the near future, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm still figuring out some of the technical difficulties, technical kinks. So bear with me, but I'm working really hard and as fast as I can to launch. But you can find me at thevegetariancarnivore.squarespace.com. Still need to get my domain on that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Janani. We'll be sure to check you out in those various places. And thank you for your time.